Okay, so I think we're about ready to start. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on our session where we're looking at retailing in a post-COVID world. I'll just introduce myself very briefly. My name's Dr. Sarah Montano. I'm from the University of Birmingham and I'm one of the senior lecturers there, and obviously one of my specialty research areas is retailing. I'm really delighted to bring you this panel and this session today. Our panel comprises of our industry experts and also leading academics from around the world. And I would say this is very much an international session as well. So we're very lucky to have our panelists calling in from Germany, from France and from Turkey as well. But I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves in a moment. Just let me bring my slides up for you. So, as I say, welcome to our session, which is Retail in a Post-COVID World, Reflections and Future Directions. And when we put our session together, we were obviously very conscious that, retailing has been very turbulent over this last year. We've all had a tremendous impact on our lives. But one of the things we really wanted to consider is really, as consumers and as retailers and as industry experts, how have we found the last year? And really importantly, where do we move on to? So where do we go from here? And would say we've set this session up very much to invite questions from the audience. So we want this session to be lively. Please ask us lots of questions. We're not going to spend very long presenting to you because we really want to communicate with you and hear from you. So I'm just going to go from my panel members in turn. So my panel members, they'll just unmute and introduce themselves briefly, and then I'll just present the next couple of slides and then we'll reconvene. So I'll just go to Inci first, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm from the University of Birmingham Business School as well, and I'm from the marketing department. Very shortly about post-COVID experiences, my expectations are we will have different types of supply chain approaches and different types of retail expectations occurring, such as retail shops, more towards online, but entrepreneurial exercises are going to be more common. So I don't want to take all of the time, so I would like to keep it short and we will join again later on.
Okay, so I'll just go to Patrick next, if you'd just like to introduce yourself.
Hi there, Patrick. So I'm a director for a management consultancy, Baringa Partners, and I sit within our consumer products and retail practice. I look after strategy and transformation, predominantly for retailers in the consumer goods businesses, food service businesses, and consumer tech businesses.
Thanks, Patrick. I'll go to Fiona next.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here and have a reason to have makeup on for once. I work for theRedTree, and we are the UK's leading beauty consultancy company. So we work with a wide range of clients, from well-funded startups, major corporates and private equity companies. And before that, I was in buying. So I did 8 years for Superdrug and for Tesco. So I'm really looking forward to discussing this today.
Thanks, Fiona. I'll go to Professor Heiner next.
Hello, welcome everybody from me as well. My name is Heiner Evanschitzki, and I am a professor of marketing from Alliance Manchester Business School. I'm sort of representing Germany because this is where I'm currently stuck at, if you wish. Travel restrictions, thanks a lot. So I'm at the moment in Germany and observing all the rules and regulations that we have in Germany. I'm trying to chip in to give you a little bit of the continental experience from my point of view. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Professor Ronan next.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Ronan de Kervenoael. I'm a professor in Rennes School of Business in France. So I'm going to represent France. I'm a professor of marketing and I've been researching retail for the last 20 years. And I'm particularly interested in retail and technology, such as the advances of robots in retailing.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, I'll go to Dr. Erdal.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Sarah and Dr. Inci and also everyone who organized and contributed to this valuable panel. It's a great honor for me to be here. On the other hand, my name is Dr. Erdal Sen. I'm from Istanbul and I'm an associate professor doctor at Istanbul Aydin University. First of all, I would like to firstly talk about the micro and the micro effects and the situation about the post-COVID-19, also the retail part and also the management and the long-term issues that we have to mention, we have to think about. So thank you very much. It's very nice to be here. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much. So before we open the panel discussion, I'm just going to contextualize where we are and where retail is. So we have a blog post that we put out with this session, which can be found on the Birmingham Business School blog. And we know that retail spending has been very volatile this year. So spending's kind of like up and kind of spending sort of like down again. We know that in the UK, when we were in our first major lockdown, our sales peaked very much online, but then they have retracted a little bit. In virtually every country in the world, there's now new kind of retailing rules. You know, things like social distancing, having to wear face masks, and particularly in stores that were quite highly experiential, so where there was a lot of person-to-person contact, so you know, things like beauty counters, personal shopping and things like that. We've seen the closure of those in-store services and they've moved online, and we've even seen that as far as some of our in-store expectations, so things like cafes and things, we've even seen some of those close and they haven't opened up yet. Now, so we've seen this strange sort of rise in on online shopping, but also in the UK we had the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, and a number of countries have had different ways of trying to stimulate some kind of consumer spending, but particularly in the UK, Eat Out to Help Out has been pretty popular and has shown that people do want to go out. So we're seeing this rise in online, but also simultaneously people do want to go outside. And I think we would argue that part of that is because retail is not just about product acquisition, but prior to the pandemic, retail had become very much around socialization and a way in which people would meet, get together and spend time together and enjoy the retail outlets. We've seen new technologies become increasingly important. So when I wanted a new desk for this office, I went onto Amazon, perhaps as many people do today, and Amazon had a function where I could see the desk in this room. So I was able to try a few and work out which one looked better and which one might not fit. So we're increasingly seeing technology as in our retail world, you know, whether that is something more exciting like robotics or something which is more functional by like using our QR codes. And of course, many people have gravitated to some form of online payment, even in store, so using things like Apple Pay, etc. Now, very much before we went into lockdown, we'd seen this big development into what we call sort of phygital. And phygital is the physical and the digital coming together. And I think one of the propositions we would have is that phygital really is one of the ways forward. And I just wanted to sort of contextualize again and just sort of give you some sort of like headlines. For anyone who's in the calling in from the UK, you'll probably know that the John Lewis advert has been launched this morning. And in the UK, the Christmas adverts for the retailers are a pretty big event. They're highly anticipated because they drive that interest, and of course they drive that online traffic. And we have been just having a debate before the panel started as to whether we were keen on the John Lewis advert or not. So we had a little bit of debate about that. We've seen retail sales rising, we say and sort of retracting as we've been through the pandemic. We have seen some retailers are making predictions for those nations that do celebrate Christmas that stockpiling is going and Christmas shopping early is starting to boost sales. And I say, you know, the certain sense in the market is that things are going to be online very much this year, and we'd be really interested to hear your thoughts as to how you're preparing for the various upcoming festivals and New Year, and what you're how you're starting to shop. I will show this slide at the end, which is where you will be able to give some feedback, which we would very much welcome. But say I will pop that slide up at the end, so nobody needs to take those details now. So we're going to move to our Q&A now. I've been given some instructions to read out. So if you'd like to ask questions, if you can type that in the Q&A. And then if your question is selected, that will be read out by my co-chair, Dr. Inci, or we are a reasonably small group. So if you would like to raise your hand, and then again, we can invite you to speak, but I've been asked that you don't use the chat for questions. So that those are our instructions. So as I say, you know, we have very much designed this panel to invite questions from our audience. So please ask as many questions as you have, and we will be very much delighted to answer those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite my panel now, and what we're going to do is we're just going to start off with what we think our thoughts are on the way in which retail is going to go forward, and what we think our post-pandemic world is going to look like. Now, the way in which I'm going to do this is I'm going to go via my screen, so I apologise if anybody is seeing the presenters in a slightly different order, but I'm going to call on the presenters in the order on my screen. And the question to my panel members is, what do you think retail will be like in a post-pandemic world? So I'm going to go to Dr. Erdal first.
Yes. Sarah, can you see me?
I can't see you, but I can certainly hear you.
Okay, because my video is not opened yet, but I will start talking. Yes, I'm starting it right now. Yes, first of all, I would like to start with the micro perspective. That's the one that I'm always writing in my articles for the starting of the COVID-19. I think the individual and the organizations and also the systems are going to be defined again. Retail is the one of the thing that we have to think about, the production part and the consumption part of all the system. So first of all, if we are thinking about redefining the individual, we have to think about the needs and wants and the changes of the individual before COVID-19 and after COVID-19. But on the other hand, if we are going to talk about the effects and the possible important part of the post-COVID-19 for the retail, we must think about new formats. We must think about omni-channel. We must think about flexible supply chains. We must think about digital marketing and campaigns related with it. We must think about the demand changes and transformations that are really critical for all the companies and all the, of course, consumers. We must think about using data and using the information and the knowledge management for all the things that we touch, and we manage the perception of the consumers in general. There will be mergers and acquisitions because we have to think about the small and medium-sized businesses for the retailing industry, retailing activities, and also the regulations and the tax policy are the latest one that we have to think about. And also we have to know and understand the, first of all, the individual perspective, secondly, the organizational perspective, and thirdly, the system. All the things are gonna change according to the COVID-19, but it's not a health issue. It's an issue that's related with the digital revolution that is going on all over the world. For example, we were thinking about, I'm from Istanbul and I'm a Turkish academician. We were thinking about that we are all different. All the cultures are very important. We are all different. But at the end of the day, with the COVID-19, we saw that all the consumption that we made are very similar. All the fears that we feel in ourselves are same or similar. All the emotions are very important and same and similar for all over the world that are living the COVID-19 pandemic. So emotions are gonna be much more important for the retail. Sarah is smiling, so I have to stop right now.
That's right. Yes. So I'm going to invite Professor Heiner next.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I think the COVID and the current situation we are in was literally only speeding up a process that was already in progress, and that is the process of digital disruption or digital revolution, similar to what Erdal said. So that process has been or had been in place for quite some time, even before COVID. And that particular crisis, in this case, it was a health crisis, in my opinion, has just increased the speed of change. So give you a couple of small examples. For instance, when you look at people who were online shopping for the first time, the average age tends to be well over 50. So that's an interesting, observation. That means you have a whole new cohort of people that have never had the experience of online shopping. So I think that means online shopping will increase in market share. I think that is one of the main development. However, we shouldn't forget that online, particularly when you talk about grocery retailing, still makes up only about 10% is online. So 90% still happens in physical stores. And in that respect, I think a development that I would anticipate in the next year is that, people will change their shopping behavior again. We were just going to a phase where people were going into more sort of the smaller stores, the more local stores. They were shopping more often, smaller baskets, but more often. Now I think that may perhaps change. It looks like the big winners of this pandemic so far at grocery retailing in particular are those that actually offer the classical one-stop shopping. You can see that in Germany, and I believe it's relatively similar to what you see in the UK. So I think there are bigger trends in society, working from home, staying home, seeing shopping less as something you have fun doing, but as something you have to do and you want to minimize that effort. So I think these are the kind of trends on the backdrop, and they have been increased, or the speed of change has increased on the back of that.
Thank you very much. So I'll go to Fiona next.
Yeah, my comments were very much following on from what Heiner said, so very slick from that perspective. I totally agree. I mean, it's no new news that digital is the way forward, but I think as a result of that, and this is something I've personally been talking about for a really long time, what are brands and retailers doing to encourage people to go to stores? So experiential is even more important than ever before. And I think for me, it's quite exciting for those brands and retailers to be thinking creatively, to give consumers a reason to stray away and to actually visit physical stores. I agree that shopping local has been a really big trend, and I think we're starting to see people talking about boycotting people like Amazon and things like that. So I think that's very interesting. And then the third point I just wanted to make was that from a consumer perspective, what COVID has done to people is so varied. So you've got people that have saved money from not going on holidays, you've got people that are out of work, or that have been impacted financially, and it's almost a bit like COVID's a journey anyway, that you have good days and you have bad days. And I think that brands and retailers need to take notice of that, and they need to target consumers on any of those days that they're on, and target each of those consumers, those that feel like they've got more money and those that are really conscious of it. And I think some retailers are doing that well, but I think that's an opportunity that those that succeed will really perfect.
Thank you very much. So I'll go to Professor Ronan next.
All right, so I am going to disagree a little bit with Heiner. And the French always disagree with everything, so I have to keep keep that tradition. So a couple of statistics. Yes, it's true that 42% of French have started to buy online for the first time, above what was the normal average. But there's a little bit of a change. For example, 150% increase in drive and collect. So it's not necessarily that they're going to go back to the supermarket. 23% decided to change or to revise a little bit where they're actually buying. And a little bit of resistance, the traditional French resistance of what's happened to our small shops. You know, can we help them? Is there some bypass in some way? You know, because otherwise and they have seen that very clearly, especially with the second confinement, that it's not going to be the supermarket that are going to be the winner, but it's going to be Amazon. And we don't like Amazon because Amazon is just the American giant. 14% of the French decided to test new shops also. So they have revised, and it's a little bit in the idea of degrowth also, because the COVID or post-retail COVID, for me, it's all about a social divide also. Some people have access to technologies. Some people have access or not to alternative shops. Some people still have to go to the hard discounter, Aldi, Lidl, or have to go to the big supermarket. But here, a choice and a crucial choice need to be made about what we want from our local territories. And you know that in France we are always labelizing things everywhere, the wine from Bordeaux and the cheese from here and the whatever other product from there. So we're quite proud of our territories. And lastly, 24% of French say they are not going to go back to the supermarket because they see the supermarket as the cause, in the sense of COVID, because they associate supermarkets with globalization, and they associate globalization with the attack on the environment, and eventually the root cause of the virus in that particular case. So this is a rethinking if we could do things better, partly due to the social divide and partly due to the fact that maybe there's a kind of a degrowth within the way that we were consuming, and that the French system hopefully is shifting a little bit from mass consumerism towards maybe a better consumerism. Last thing I wanted to say, we have seen that in the middle between the two confinement, in fact, when the French people actually rediscover France. The same as in many countries, we have realized that in fact, very close from where we live, there's a lot of really interesting activities to do, and we don't need to go necessarily on the other side of the world. So for me, the important key takeaway is the social divide that it has created, and how the retailers are going to change to compensate for that social divide.
Thank you very much. So I come to Patrick, last but not least.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, fellow panelists. I think what's interesting, just listening to all the points of view, and I think it's reinforcing the work we're doing with a number of the kind of household retailers, is retail is quite a broad church. So I think we need to kind of look at it very much from a segmental perspective and understand both in the kind of segments within retail and then globally how that works and how that's impacted. I think having said that, there are a number of kind of key themes that come through and we're seeing with our clients. So as I think a couple of the panelists have said before, this acceleration to digital was there before. The pandemic has given that a push. Actually, what we're seeing, if you look at the most recent ONS data, is the kind of online penetration is actually dropping back down slightly. Probably won't go back to where it was, and none of our clients think it will go back to where it was before the pandemic, but it probably won't stay at the high that it's hit. So if you take the UK market, £400 billion retail market, depending on the numbers you believe, you know, there's still a sort of a good nearly 300 billion of that goes through physical retail channels, stores for want of a better term. And for retailers, that's their most profitable channel by far. Now, the economics are changing slightly with retailers. So with more of us working from home, becomes less expensive. The fulfillment costs of home delivery directly become slightly less expensive. So that's changed the shift. I think the other kind of key theme we're seeing is scale and access to capital and cash matters. So to fund this digital transformation costs a lot of money. What we're seeing are the bigger businesses look and invest in automation now. So we work with a number of automation providers, and they have a 3 and 4 year backlog order list. So you wouldn't be able to get automation bought and fitted into a warehouse or store for probably 3 or 4 years if you ordered it today, which gives you a sense of kind of where the focus is. We had before this and still have an aging labour workforce in the retail sector, predominantly in the UK, particularly in the supply chain area. So that push on efficiency will continue. I think the other thing is, you know, I think all retailers before this were clear their store formats were not right. This has just proven that, and they're accelerating towards that. And the increase in the use of, in the UK in particular, CVAs has indicated there's a real push to rationalise store estate. And then the final thing is all of them are looking at value. So value has become the key focus driver across all of our clients. I think probably predicting not just the pandemic, but the knock-on effect of the pandemic and what that means to consumer confidence.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So Dr. Inci is chairing our questions, and I'm delighted to see that there are already some questions from our great audience today. So Dr. Inci, would you like to present the first question?
Yes, sure. The first question is about retail attainment. Do you think that if the retail attainment will continue, or actually post-COVID, how the elements of this will change? I don't know who would like to answer this question. Anyone volunteering?
I'll start with that one. I can start with that one because I was having a look at the chat and I could see that somebody mentioned Phygital as well. So I thought I could probably I'll start and then invite one of my fellow panelist members in. No, I don't think it's the end of the retailtainment industry. Retailtainment is about how many of the large retailers, particularly sort of the way department stores have gone, in that they use their store base to create exciting things which entertain the customer. And these are things like, you know, that were now very useful. So the fact that you can like go into the Apple store and you can play with all the technologies, to the fact that, you know, if you go to somewhere like Bloomingdale's, then, you know, they have a Magnolia bakery and things like that in store. So it's very much around sort of giving consumers other reasons to come to a store other than just the product base. So no, I won't. I don't think it's the end of retailtainment, and also I think as people, and I think this is what Eat Out to Help Out showed, and I know there are some discussions as to the consequences of that, but I think what it showed is, you know, as people and as a society, we need to come together, that we need to be with other people. That's how we are, is that we need to be with others and we want to be with others. And retail is a proxy for that socialization. You know, if you just think about the types of shopping that you do, you go with friends and you start shopping, and then you might go and have some drinks later on in the evening, and then, you know, if you're a shopping mall, you might go to the cinema as well. So no, I don't think it will end. And as Megan says, just about phygital being the way forward. Yeah, so and it really touches on what Heiner was saying as well, and Ronan was mentioning around technologies, in that what we're seeing is digitalization and physical coming together, and in the same place, and thinking about how the retailer operates in that holistic way. So I can see Mehmet's popped into the chat talking about, you know, buy online and pick up in store. So that's quite a simplistic example of being digital. But what I can also see, you know, is things getting more exciting, you know, having robots to kind of service kind of interaction. So there's some great stores, particularly in sort of in Singapore, where you can go in store, it's completely self-service, and you can access everything that you need by using various digital operations. So I think, I think in summary, I would say that it's not going to die.
George also wants to answer this question. Would you like to come in, George?
I've just gone quiet.
Okay.
I was just going to ask, just thinking on what Heiner was saying. Did you want to expand on that question about retail attainment?
Yes, I'd love to. That's quite dear to me, to look at how retailers can become more inspirational places to be. I think you're absolutely right in saying that it's perhaps the most important element of retailing. Yes, we have to get some stuff, but there are multiple ways of doing that. But we are social beings. We want to do things just because we want to do those things, not necessarily because we have to. And maybe adding a slightly different angle to what you have said is, I think it will be very interesting to see how pure online will also try to sort of emulate that experience, that inspirational shopping experience in a purely online context. And again, technology can be a conduit of that. If you think about immersive virtual reality worlds, I mean, I can see that as if you wish, a COVID-safe way to somehow interact with people in a different manner. It may sound a little bit remote and a little bit alien to most of us, but you know, we learn quickly. And we get used to things rather quickly. And as I said before, I was amazed how quickly an older generation adapted to this new world. And that is something I would have never thought. I would never thought that my old mother would actually try to do their first online shopping. She's never done that. And he said, in this life, maybe in my next life I will, but not in this life. That was her mantra for the past 20 years. So in that sense, I think there will be new experiences. There will be these interactive social interactions, which could also happen without the physical social interactions. And that the newer generation being much more used to those kind of interaction, I think that will actually grow. But certainly there's no way I see the end of the physical retailing. I don't think we're gonna experience that, because the entertainment and the inspiration aspect will be so dominant.
Thank you very much. Dr. Inci, just before we take the next question, our ESRC colleagues have popped an instruction in our chat. We're allowed to have our cameras back on.
Yes.
So panelists, you're allowed to have your cameras back on. We're just doing as we're told.
Do we have time? Erdal wants to pop in for this question, but
yes,
we have a few more questions.
Please do so.
So Erdal, would you like to elaborate on this, please?
Yes, it would be great for me. First of all, as Patrick mentioned, value is the most important part of it. And also, as Heiner said, the speed of change has been increased very much, and rate and speed of change. In my opinion, the time range is very important. Are we talking about for 5 years, for 10 years, for 20 years? Because when you think about the time and when you think about us, our generation, when we born, there was not internet, there was not mobile communication, there was not the Zoom, there was not anything. We only had one TV channel. We were watching the cowboys, we were watching American culture, everything, as Ronan said. The Big Brother was watching us, and they are still watching us. But on the other hand, we are going to die. We are going to die in 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years. And the people, us, knowing the world without internet, will die. And also, for the long run, individual will change, organizations will change, systems will change, means that the paradigm shift will make all the things will change, transformed, and value. After transformation, will there be a value or not? So according to our paradigm, according to our philosophy and perspective, retailing is very important, shopping is a part of socialization, etc., etc., etc. I believe, I agree with them. But on the other hand, there's a new world, there's a big revolution is going on, and after 10 years, we are not going to live in a world that we cannot believe it right now, because we wouldn't believe that if 10 years ago they told us that 9 academicians will meet on the computer and talk about the issues online and all the world would have chance to watch them. It was not possible. So I have a theory, it's called Senism. Sen means you in English. My surname is Sen, but it's also a dot under S, so it means happy. I think that the individual and will be defined and will change all the things, and the individual must be defined according to me, I, and the you and me, Sen in me. So it's another part of view, but I would like to share especially that points. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Inci, if we go to our next question.
We have a question regarding the rural locations. I would like to make some comments about it before I ask the panel. But when Ronan and Heiner expressed their views, my experience is also closer to Ronan's. Although the big supermarkets are winning because they are providing us with food. On the other hand, we are working on a project at the moment in rural England. Basically, this project is looking into farming and beautiful landscapes. That's what it is called. And we are seeing at the moment non-retailers becoming retailers and ditching the value chain, shortcutting the value chain because the value chain has collapsed in a way during the first lockdown. So they need to reach to us, the consumers, in one way or the other. And that's how they are doing this. They are non-retailer wholesalers, I have seen, and also these rural farms are trying to reach to the consumers using different manners. So in another question, which forms of retailers will remain, we will perhaps see different types of retailers forming alongside, not in place of, but alongside the current retailers. So that's my answer. And I would like to ask anyone else who wants to go for this, Heiner, Ronan, because you were talking about this previously. Ronan, please.
You raise your finger. Okay, I can go on that. I think answering the first question also about the inspiration that the small shop are providing. I think it's very important for retailers to keep in contact with their customer. You can have a lot of big data, you can have a lot of web analytics, but that will never replace the information that you get in the contact of your customer. That's why I think that the physical shop will still have a very important role to play in inspiring people. Definitely agree with Inci. There will be probably a fragmentations that's going to happen of the retail environment. We have seen over the last 20 or 30 years a global fragmentation. So the Gap coming to France, McDonald's coming to France. They should have forgotten that one. But we are going also to have a reshaping, probably from the bottom, of people that have decided that there must be a better ways of getting things, or people that want a greater traceability. I want to know where the apple I eat come from. I want to know more about seasonality, and that will create opportunities for new entrants within the market that are going to disrupt the incumbent, and even shops like the hard discounter that disrupted the traditional retailers, we're going to say in groceries. We are going to have new entrants that are going to enter the market. We have forgotten a lot the rural environment. We say that the rural people don't have access to technology. The rural people are backward. I mean, in Brittany, and when we talk of people from Paris, they look at us and this is great for holiday, but for nothing else. This is going to serve. There's a lot of talents, there's a lot of skills, and there is easy access to technology now to build a website. So for the small shops in France, we have seen a lot of websites that are grouping in associations or in clubs to actually sell together. So it's a new way of selling also. I'm selling only wool, or I'm selling only clothes, or I'm selling only shoes, but we group together when we are online, offering a completely different experience from what you get from those generalist retailers that are selling a little bit of everything, but without having the passion for any of the particular items that they are selling.
Thank you very much. I think Patrick's just going to come into that one, and then we'll go to our next question.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on the question around farmers becoming kind of moving up the value chain into retailers. I mean, our experience of this is they're very different businesses, and I think one of the benefits of diversifying the two and keeping them separate is you keep the risk in the right place. So if you think about fresh produce, it's incredibly complex and risky business backing yourselves to produce something that requires, particularly has such a kind of dependency on the weather. And I think what we're seeing actually is more retailers go the other way, which is to say, this is a real specialism and risk. We want to transfer this and keep this with the areas of production, i.e. the farmers. We need to make sure that we've got it covered, because we've got things like global warming happening, which are changing the kind of dynamic around the weather and the quality of growing in the land. But actually, this isn't our core business. But at scale, we need to source from multiple places just to physically deal with the demand and the scale needed to do that. So I think there will be, will there be more farmers looking to go direct to consumer? Yes, you've got businesses already doing that. So Oddbox in the UK do that. Farm Drop or another firm that do something similar, where they take produce direct from the farmer straight to the consumer. They've all their challenges have been scaling, because this is particularly in food, it's a scale industry.
Continuing on that, Fiona or Patrick, would you like to comment on the what kind of retail formats will be staying or forming in the future?
And the winners and the losers.
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
I think it's probably not new news that the department stores need to be thinking about what they're doing. They're space hungry. And yeah, we've seen that reflected in their results and things as they go. I think I would probably agree with what Patrick was saying earlier, that things need to be even more segmented, and retailers need to understand what works in each of the segments, and they need to be tighter over what they're doing with the space that they have as well. So I think it will be more smaller ones in large, but I think it'll be ones that are more educated on what their consumers are looking for and where.
Yeah, I'd agree on that one. I think that for me, it's always been about knowing your customer and tracking with your customer, and understanding what goes on, what's front of their mind, and where they want to play. I mean, typically when you see kind of areas of financial challenge, which we're anticipating happening after this crisis, you see a greater polarization and segmentation, actually, typically, both at the top and the bottom, ironically. So I'd imagine we would be seeing that. I think, like I said before, a lot of these businesses that have struggled at the moment, it's a cash issue. So it's access to cash, access to capital. So it's the funding behind them, and it's how cash generative they are as a business, and how much debt they've got to pay down or not, as the case may be. So, and again, to the points that the panelists have all made previously, this was happening before. It will just be accelerated.
There's a question regarding the fraud prevention. what impact has COVID-19 on e-fraud prevention? Anyone who would like to chip in?
There's not a huge rush to answer that one.
No.
a tricky area, and perhaps for consideration another day.
I mean, I can give a couple of minutes on it, if that's interesting.
Go for it.
If people are interested, I think most of this is around. So we're seeing a greater adoption of things like robotic process automation and technology that look to weed these things out and look for patterns in fraud prevention. So that's something that we've seen a lot of retailers moving to, the deployment of artificial intelligence and those types of technologies. I think, you know, we would expect to continue to see that as a significant cost on the profit and loss accounts for most retailers, is shrinkage and fraud and those type of things. I guess retail generally is slightly less regulated than a lot of other industries, so it's a bigger issue for the financial service industry, insurance industry, and those type of areas. But you know, it's something I think I don't know necessarily whether it will accelerate, but it's something that I think anything where you are losing cost and need to manage cash is something that's an area of focus.
Thank you very much.
Another question is about printed promotional materials. So what COVID had in practice is you cannot use your printed promotional material. And is this going to be a habit, electronic or more virtual ways of promotions, or are we going to go back to printed materials?
I think, Fiona, would you be able to take that one?
I think it'll be a bit of both. I think there's no doubt that digital will play a huge part in communication within retail going forward. I think at the same time, we're seeing that costs of customer acquisition are going up hugely as advertisers are wisening to it, and brands that previously really benefited off that are struggling slightly more now to reach the same benefit. And I think the other thing that's interesting is all trends come around as well. And at the moment, print is still part of marketing communication, albeit decreasing and smaller. And I think it will get to a point where that is actually a way for brands or retailers to stand out as well. And particularly if they can do it in a targeted way, in a creative way. So I think digital will play a huge part, but I wouldn't rule out print as long as it's done in a creative way.
I think we answered the small shops, so I'm skipping that question. If they are benefiting, we answered that question, and I'm following the other one. Yeah, mental health. Basically, technology is becoming a huge part of our lives at the moment, and what can we do to ensure our fixation on technology doesn't limit our social interaction? What are the impacts of mental health overusing technology? What are the impacts on our mental health? Erdal, please.
First of all, when we think about the mental health, we have to think about the digital technologies that are in our lives right now and can be in the future, how they will transform in the future. For example, augmented reality, or for example, all the virtual things that we cannot, predict what's gonna be about the technological part. So for the needs and wants and the satisfaction of all consumers and individuals all around the world about the stakeholder management part, because we must think about the stakeholder management and we must think about the individuals and their mental health issues according to that, because the world has to be much more greener. The world must be much more equal, much more smarter with the technologies and with all the digital revolution. This is not a dream, but on the other hand, it will transform the individual, as I said before. So when we think about the individual, all the companies, all the brands are dealing with the rational part of the human until these years. But we are defining that there's an emotional part, and we must deal with the emotions and the emotional variables are very critical for us, for our brand management, for the perception management, for all the communication and the customer relationship management strategies, CRM strategies, and all the things related with big data. So I'm afraid that one of the most important things that are going to be a problem for the humanity is the mental health related with all of these issues, because we are thinking about the production part, we are thinking about the consumption part, we are thinking about the marketing, we are thinking about managing the people, managing the organizations, managing the systems. So all the things directly related with all the applications of Industry 4.0 are big chances for humanity, but also risks for the mental health of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going
Before you go, there is another question for you. The question is, how do you relate your Senism theory to the topic?
Senism is the one that defines the individual. We are always talking about ourselves, and we like, for example, seeing us individually in the social media, for example. But Senism defines the me with the Sen in me. And it means that we are going to define ourselves, or the system are going to define the selves according to individual perspective. So the perception of me and perception of all the world around me must be defined again. For example, if you think about Sigmund Freud, if you think about Karl Marx, if you think about Adam Smith or Nietzsche, if they were living in these days, how would they change their theories? How would they think about, for example, ego, superego? It's directly related with Senism, or Lacan, or what's the value created, added value, Patrick, for example? What's the added value that Marx wrote, and what's the added value that that's gonna be for the robotics, that's gonna be for the smart factories, for example? Where can we think about the capital? Who is the capitalist? Who is the labor? Who is the individual as a customer and consumer also? So Senism defines all of these.
Erdal, I'm just sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to stop you there, just because I want to capture just some thoughts on technology and mental health, because I think that's quite an important one. So I'm just going to ask Heiner and Ronan. So Heiner first, and then Ronan. If you can just quickly add your thoughts on technology and mental health.
Yes, I'm reasonably optimistic. I would say the technology as such, it's neither good nor bad. As we have seen, we have automation or help with care, for instance. We have, at least in this country, and I think in most developed countries, we have too few carers. So helping those in those situations and being helped by technology, I think, can be quite useful and can be actually a good thing that would reduce mental health issues. On the other hand, of course, we have to learn, and I'm with Erdal in that one, we have to learn to live with these new, these new realities. There are new things around us which we have to learn how to deal with. We don't have to get, all dependent on it. We still, we're human beings. What defines us as human beings, we have to still be mindful of that. And, the technology, I think I'm reasonably optimistic that over time we will learn how to make the best of those technologies. I'm not really a pessimist in that sense. It will perhaps give a little bit, a couple of hiccups on the way, I'm sure, until we have learned it. But in the long term, I think it will be more beneficial than harmful.
Thank you. And ask Ronan if I could just have your thoughts quickly, and then I'll ask. Well, then we'll need to finish because we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Okay, so I agree with Heiner that we have to learn with technology, but I think the reverse is also true. Technology had to live with us in a sense, and technology is at our service. So, for example, if we have a QR code in supermarket, or if we have intelligent aisle in supermarket, people that have allergies can figure out just by flashing their mobile mobile phone, which product is applicable or not. We can envision ourselves with clothing and all those kind of things. So I think we have to see that the technology is more at our service, because we are the one programming the technology, and we are the one saying we want that type of technology and not that other type of technology. And this is a little bit the big debate we have on the GAFA at the moment. Are they too powerful? Who decide? Net neutrality is on the horizon. We have seen all the tweet by Donald, and Twitter saying we are not very sure if what he says is ever true. Please don't listen. So we are just at the beginning of that debate. We have that debate on the 5G in France also now. Is it beneficial? Is it something that we want? We know that cryptocurrency, about 35 million users are using the entire electricity of Denmark in any given year. So, choices are going to happen, but it's a bit what Erdal was saying. We are now the digital migrant, but the digital native are going to make all those decisions, the same as we have been making decisions on copyright and Napsters and patents over the last previous year. And I think it's going to accelerate dramatically, but we should remain very positive that we have been so far able to create technologies that are helpful. Of course, they destroy jobs in some part, but they also create opportunity in others. And this is what we have to do. We have to insist on technology redistributing wealth.
I'm just going to stop you there, because we're just about to finish and we'll just be out of time. Just as a very final summary, so you've basically got about 6 words each. I know everyone's academics and we're industry experts and we like talking, but you're basically 6 words. So what in let's say 2030, what will our post-pandemic world be like? I'm going to reverse the order, so I'm going to go to Patrick first.
Consolidated, automated, and value-driven.
Oh, excellent. You can come back again. I'm going to go to Fiona next. You're muted.
Targeted, personalised, and digital.
Come to Ronan next.
Wealth redistribution and going over the digital divide.
Heiner.
I think it will be a merge of the 2 worlds, online and offline.
Inci.
I think we will be seeing interesting social engagements.
And last but not least, Erdal.
Digitalized, individual-oriented, and Senist, I think, lately.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say to all of the attendees, thank you very much for joining us and asking us such great questions. I'd also like to say I'm really sorry if we weren't able to get to your question, but all the questions were really amazing and I wish that we had more time. I'd also like to thank all my panel members today for being able to join us and sparing their time. I think we've all decided that retail is still really important to us all, but technologies are going to become increasingly important, but we need to be cautious with how we proceed with that. And my final action is I have to make sure that I share the screen, show that people can give feedback. So that's just our little feedback slide. So you can apparently use the QR code, talking of new technologies, or you can use that link to give us our feedback. So I will just leave that there for a moment. But as I say, I'm very thankful that we had lots of attendees. We really enjoyed sharing our thoughts with you. And I think you can probably find us relatively easily because all our details are on the invitation. But if anybody would like to or contact me as the chair of the event, then I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards or answer any questions that perhaps were outstanding. So hopefully everybody has that slide and has seen the feedback, and